Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last session in our database series, Protecting the Crown Jewels, Why Good Enough is Not Good Enough in Data Security. My name is Julia Kirsten. I'm the Global Events Manager here at Trustwave and will be moderating today's session. In our where to find your sensitive data in a hybrid environment, in our second session, we discussed how to best protect your data. Now we're digging deeper into the question of why it's arguably more important than ever to effectively secure your data. If you missed any of the previous sessions, don't worry, we have the opportunity to watch them on demand. Simply click on the links provided to the right of your webinar console. A few housekeeping items so you can get the most out of today's session. If you are viewing this session live, our webinar platform allows you to customize your viewer screen. Feel free to adjust the size and positioning of the windows to accommodate your liking. We do recommend that you use Chrome as the browser of choice. If you have any problems with the audio or the session delivery, I always recommend that you hit refresh. I promise you won't need to re-log in, and hopefully the system will overcome any connectivity issues. Today's webinar will include both a presentation and a question and answer session. You will find the questions window in your webinar screen, and we encourage you to enter the questions as you think of them throughout the presentation, and we will address as many as possible at the end. Lastly, today's presentation will be recorded, and we will be sending a follow-up email to everyone with a link to that recording. A copy of the recording will also be made available on demand on our website for future reference. Before we dive in, I would like to welcome our security experts who will be presenting today, Raul Gutierrez and Parker Caby. Raul is the DBSS Global Solution Architect Team Lead at Trustwave. He is a 30-year veteran to the industry and holds several technical and professional certifications. Today, Raul is helping Trustwave build their internal teams and capabilities around database security globally. Parker is a 7-year veteran of Trustwave and has worked with many regions, verticals, and client sets. Prior to this summer, he handled data security for Trustwave's biggest clients. He's located outside of Chicago with his 2 young boys. Without further ado, let's get started. Parker, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie, and thank you everybody who's watching this live, who's accessing it later as a recording, or otherwise engaging with us around data security. I've been a sales leader at Trustwave for 7 years, I think, is the number I gave her. And today we're going to cover the challenges in providing actually effective and impactful versus just checkbox security. Where the agenda is going to be first establishing the business problem, what we're talking about. I will be lending experiences to what I've seen in terms of my dozens and hundreds of conversations with customers of all sizes and verticals, and all across the world too. I've worked with customers in just about every continent that has permanent residents, and it's giving a perspective from not just from someone who's been selling it, but giving you as best I can the buyer's perspective. But then we'll cover, with Raul's help, traditional versus purpose-built tools in the data security space. And then we'll tie it up with a conclusion, leaving time for Q&A. And as Julie said, if you have questions, type them in when you've got them. You don't need to sit on them. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. And of course, Raul and I are available and accessible via email, etc., if you have questions outside of this. So, okay, so where I want to start with us today, a kind of a 101 refresher on what is personal data. What are we trying to protect here? It can be many different categories. Some organizations have IP, have manufacturing schematics and data. Other organizations, like hospitals, are going to have medical records and other impactful information. But by and large, the personal data and information that we're protecting, that bad actors are after, is the same kind of things you wouldn't want someone to access in your own home. We're talking about contact information, IP information, addresses and locations, as well as specific things regarding things that could be identifiable, like religious information, medical records, criminal records. This is all information that you either have in your home, or many times an organization is going to own that stuff as well, whether it's because it's information they deal with, like perhaps if it's a manufacturing firm or a trade unionship, they're going to have that information on hand, or even an HR department in a regular organization is going to have financial on historical records of their employees that it's their responsibility and obligation to protect. So that's what we're starting with here. And one thing that I never tire of evangelizing is that about 85, pretty much almost every organization that goes through any kind of discovery or true assessment of their sensitive data discovers they have more of that than they originally thought. It doesn't just mean more files, more gigabytes. It means more locations, more assets, more databases that are either derelict from a previous project but still up and running, or a pet IT or shadow IT project of somebody that is not above board. And that's a striking number. I would say one thing that I have seen in the process of working with many organizations is when they sit down and do a discovery, do an assessment of really what they have in inventory, whether it's assisted with tools and technology and consulting, or whether it's something they perform pen and paper themselves, is they always find something shocking, something disturbing in terms of a liability or a risk or an open access, or somebody who left the company 10 years ago still having admin likeness. So food for thought in regarding that. And then from a high level, what is good data security posture? Typically, I would say any organization that offers security on the database, if you poll them, they're going to come back with some variation of this approach. Ultimately, at the get, need to have visibility and identify the databases themselves and any vulnerabilities and weaknesses. From there, you also need to have visibility into who can access and any privileges or entitlements, any specific exceptions to the norm that might put somebody with more access than they need. And then at the end of the day, you need to have some form of regular audit or continuous 24/7 monitoring for changes and accesses that are unusual or out of the ordinary, or for just simply known bad actions or known indicators of compromise. If you take it all the way across, it makes pretty good sense. You need to understand what the vulnerabilities are. You need to understand who might have access to a database that has those vulnerabilities. And then you naturally want to be informed when that combination, when we go from a tornado watch to a tornado warning, when we suddenly have all the ingredients together and it's actively happening. That's the monitoring and the frequent auditing. So from that high level, we're talking about what sensitive data is in this environment and talking about what best practice looks like. How confident are you that these best practices are being followed at your organization? To keep it simple, let's go with highly confident, moderately confident, or not confident at all. I'll give you all about a minute to reflect and answer that, and we'll move forward. And Julie, if there's something that needs to be done to make the poll calculate, let me know, or otherwise take care of it for me, please. All right, so I think we've had enough time there we've got about half the people in there. It looks like it's still trickling in, so I will wait another 30 seconds or so. Catch any deeply contemplative attendees, then we'll move on. All right, so I'm impressed with this. So moderately confident, nice. It sounds like a good percentage of people here are already doing something. Hopefully you don't feel moderately confident with no approach to security on the database. So it's good that there is a baseline here in the audience. And I also appreciate the honesty of people who are not confident or feel that they've really got it covered. Good, I'm glad we have a mix. So the challenges, so what is in the way of those three steps, assessing the vulnerabilities, controlling rights and access, as well as monitoring and auditing on a continuous schedule. As we talked about with that first number of 85% not knowing where all their assets are, that's the big piece. You cannot protect the data you don't know you have or you don't know who has access to. A lot of these challenges are also across the entire security space. I'm sure you see articles about the lack of dedicated resources, the cost of maintaining those talents and technologies, as well as the myriad different audits that need to be done for different compliance regimes or different internal and external auditing firms. And then most importantly, the need to expand the organization into digital transformation such as cloud is going to require stiff security. So if organizations are unable to meet those needs, they're not going to be able to enable very good transformation. We covered this earlier. I wanted to baseline us with that information. Raul, my partner in crime, I'm going to hand it over to you here to talk more about this from a bit of a technical aspect. I appreciate you sharing your insights.
Absolutely. Thank you, Parker. And absolutely. So the world we live in today, such an appropriate statement, data is everywhere. And the more data that we collect, the more valuable it becomes to our organizations. There are many regulations out there that require evidence on what controls you have around your sensitive data and where it lives, and thus identifying and securing these systems that contain this sensitive information have become mission critical for IT security staff. And why is this important? Because people want to steal our data. And day one of the deployment of these databases, they are full of vulnerabilities, every kind of database that exists. And there are powerful attacks that are easy to find and exploit. Remediating and administering these environments and applying these patches requires skilled staff and time. Most organizations struggle with meeting these timelines. And you need to comply with data privacy regulations in order to meet those requirements of the organization. Vulnerability assessment technology has existed for more than 25 years, and vulnerability management is considered a fundamental security process recommended by standards like NIST and PCI, DSS, and these are performed by nearly every industry. Vulnerability assessment technology is quite mature and has had a long time to develop, but there are important differences in the tool sets and what they are designed to do. And so there are many vulnerability assessment solutions in the market that provide general assessments. These solutions typically focus on the breadth of coverage across all of your IT assets or a good mixture of them. Over the years, vulnerability assessment has added specific features to handle IT assets beyond operating systems or network devices. They've included things like web applications and databases. Some have gone beyond identifying vulnerabilities and assessing the configuration of a system. Traditional vulnerability assessment solutions focus on the systems more broadly, and there are also solutions in the industry that provide specific expertise to particular set of IT assets, such as databases or data stores. Gartner has pointed out that in-depth assessments of databases and applications such as ERP systems like SAP or Oracle are not widely supported in these traditional VA solutions. And so traditional is very broad-based, and these solutions have included database scanning as a checkbox for compliance. If your organization requires rigorous certification of database security controls, then you should make sure you are working with a provider who has that expertise to provide the essential assessment of these high-value assets. As an example, a leading BA solution vendor might find hundreds of database security issues, whereas a purpose-built solution might uncover thousands of database security weaknesses, as well as provide context to help your team prioritize which need immediate attention. Now, here are some factors to consider when selecting a vulnerability assessment tool for your databases. Let's start with vulnerability knowledge base. A purpose-built solution should have an elite team of database security researchers, and the knowledge base should go beyond checking for known vulnerabilities and provide in-depth assessment of these security weaknesses. What are some examples of that? Password issues, excessive permissions to users or roles, misconfigurations, improper access controls, and many more. It provides comprehensive remediation beyond just what patch to apply. The knowledge base should offer proven workarounds and fix scripts to help your team remediate these issues more quickly. A traditional scanner has an expansive breadth of coverage, and these vulnerability assessment solutions rely on feeds from the National Vulnerability Database run by NIST. And there you see a CVE list from MITRE for content. And so this information is commonly among traditional solutions and only provides a surface level of known vulnerabilities. Now, let's talk about user rights scanning expertise. And so a purpose-built solution can provide deep dive scans of the relationships between users, roles, objects, and permissions in the database. This in-depth analysis really helps organizations understand the key areas of risk that they have, and it helps them answer questions, security questions, and business leaders need to know, like, who has access to my sensitive table containing PII information? What type of access does a user have to that PII data? How was that user granted access to this information? Was it by a role, a direct grant, a grant via multiple roles? Which privileged users should be placed on a watch list? Traditional vulnerability assessment solutions do not provide functionality to review database user access privileges. Let's talk about database compliance scanning. And again, we'll give you a comparison between a purpose-built and your traditional scanners. Purpose-built have compliance scanning, but it's only a piece of what the scanners can do. The knowledge base will have policies for each CIS benchmark or DISA-STIG down to the database vendor and version. So it's very detailed. The knowledge base should be consistently updated, and when there are new versions from the vendors. The purpose-built solution should have best practice policies recommended as starting baselines for these various regulations or standards. Policies can be customized to adapt to an organization's environment, and they should include but not be limited to regulations like HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, CMMC, GLBA, also regulations spanning a more global footprint. Traditional VA tools have added database compliance scanning capabilities to really help organizations comply at a surface level and provide some vanilla policies out of the box that do not allow for much customization for known unique environments and configurations. So now I'd like to take a minute and have a poll to all the attendees and ask, has your organization moved applications to the cloud? A, no plans in the near future. B, we have a few applications moved to the cloud. We've maybe completed 40% of our plan, or we're 100% cloud infrastructure. We've seen organizations adopt the cloud migration at different velocities. And so it'd be great to have an understanding of the folks attending today, what that looks like for your organizations. We'll give you a minute to respond. Thank you. And certainly understanding the organization's use of the cloud really helps us better define what those database challenges are for organizations trying to take this on. So it'd be good insight how everyone is addressing. Obviously, there's amazing reasons for moving to the cloud, alleviating administrative and liability issues that exist with maintaining those infrastructures, and the cloud platforms certainly help us help organizations in eliminating some of that additional administration and liability. All right, I think we've got at least half of the attendees who have responded. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. So we see, again, a very balanced response. We have about 40% of that migration. And again, I get to work with a lot of companies who, and I'd say that's about right. There are some organizations that are 100% cloud adoption. I'd say a majority of organizations that have some tenure in existence have a migration plan, and more than likely have started that process, but have not fully completed their objectives. So thank you everyone for replying and providing some feedback. That was great. And so, what are the challenges when we deploy our applications to the cloud? And again, we're talking about your traditional scanners and comparing them to a purpose-built solution. Even the best generalist security scanners are not sufficient to protect your most important asset, your data. You really need a specialized tool for that environment. And standard vulnerability assessment providers typically offer a basic level of security for your databases. A good example of that is, 700 checks versus 5,000 checks. So a generalist scanner will provide only the basic compliance checks versus a purpose-built tool. And what about the areas for zero trust? We continue to hear that sort of as a buzzword in the industry, but what that means is implementing a least privilege environment and providing access to resources that are needed, but not more than what is needed. And so generalist systems may not have a user access control system, no intelligent database activity monitoring that can detect exfiltration. And so it's going to have limited intelligence, and their guidance is limited to infrequent knowledge updates based on industry CVEs, and vulnerability feeds. So database security implementation should be easy. It should be done within days. You want a fast implementation and straightforward integration into your existing ecosystem without changing the architecture of your network or operating systems. We definitely want a faster time to value, and typically a purpose-built solution can save you up to weeks of implementation time. continuous assessment deployed within days, and continuous monitoring deployed within a week. And so a software only approach simplifies the implementation process. And we do, and there are, in some cases, there may not be any proprietary hardware or network re-architecture. Parker?
Thanks, Raul, for taking everybody through that. So arriving here at the end of our presentation here, we want to bring it together and talk about where Trustwave sits in this space, and also talk about use cases for any purpose-built tool. And at the end of the day, there are dozens of ways to secure, audit, and scan. It is very important that you have the right tool for the job in security and in anything else in life. It's something that we are very passionate about, that it is important to have a purpose-built tool for the most important assets, for the most important locations and databases in your organization. Oftentimes, customers will use a generalist for some of the wide open areas to cover, but when it comes to IP or financials or production, it is important to put a tool that provides effective and specialized data security versus simply kind of a best practice, a compliance, because PCI compliance is not what's going to keep information secure. And it's also what's not going to give you a fast reaction time when the bad things happen. Co-opetition is very healthy in the space. The majority of our customers that utilize a Trustwave scanner also utilize other technologies as well. That's a reality, and that makes sense. Our technology is built to get along with others, and we do typically see, as I'd mentioned, multiple tools in place. So at the end of the day, make sure you're asking the right questions about having the right tool for the right job, and making sure that the things that simply cannot be lost, cannot be stolen, cannot be accessed are appropriately protected. And an easy way to do that is to combine the right tools for the right severity and make sure that the coverage is adequate where it needs to be. In Trustwave's organization, we have App Detective Pro and DB Protect. There are two vulnerability assessment programs that each allow for very focused and specialized data security management. If you want to see those in action, we can, of course, talk to those offline, schedule some time with us. We're very excited to share that information. But at this point, we've really covered what it looks like to go best in breed and have the right tool for the job. So we already have a couple of questions coming through. We want to work on answering those. And then please, anybody else, while we're still on the line, feel free to type those questions in now. David's got a couple of questions off the get, and Raul, it'll probably make the most sense for you to handle those, just speaking to the actual update and patching of the tool, as well as how it will work with the customer environment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Parker. Yes, and so the question is, do you have a service to actually update and patch the databases? And so the technology here at Trustwave provides identification of security weaknesses, gaps, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations. And so a missing patch is certainly something that we identify. We try to align ourselves with the release of Patch Tuesday, when the vendors release their patches, so that our clientele can assess where they are in implementing this new database patch or hotfix. When identifying vulnerabilities or missing patches, we advise the security team, which in turn should enforce this with operations, to actually implement those database patches. We identify specifically which ones they are, but we do not run it directly in the database. When you identify misconfigurations or vulnerabilities, it's extremely important to test this out in a development environment to make sure there's no impact to the application. It is possible the application was built on needing that particular configuration or vulnerability. So it is always highly recommended to test this before deploying to production. So apologize for the long-winded answer, but no, we do not apply it directly to the database. We provide insight and all the details that you need to know where it's missing across all of your environment and what patch is needed. Hope that answers your question. Next question.
Yeah. And I'll build off
questions. Go ahead.
I'll build off what Raul said real quick, in that speaking with a lot of prospective clients, that question does come up a lot. Like, can you just do it for us? I mean, there isn't anything technologically prohibiting it, but it's really bad practice to just blindly update. So what we do provide on the reporting is very specific instructions as to which component needs to be updated. And we provide links and information and direction on that as specifically as we can. But it is something that is a dangerous slope to ski down with having your security provider make those production level decisions. It's very much in the best interest that the customer or the end user be responsible.
Okay, I've got a couple of more questions that have come in. Let's see, this next one. Do the Trustwave database security tools support on-premise databases only, or is it only for the cloud?
I think I can take this one, Parker. Thank you, Julie. So the Trustwave solution is really agnostic, and we've had been in existence for quite some time. So we have clients who have the technology on-premise and have moved to the cloud, and so the technology can live again on-prem, in AWS, in Azure, and you can manage and secure databases in any of those hybrid environments. And so it can live in the cloud. You can support database targets in the multi-cloud environment or even on-prem. We can give you that single pane of glass view to what your risk posture is across all of your data stores.
Okay,
that answers your question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next one, does the Trustwave solution help support zero trust initiatives around data access and data privacy?
Absolutely, a great question. And so a lot of organizations are currently attempting to get a hold of overprivileging issues. The longer systems have been around, the more than likely privileges are out of whack. It is very complex to see the relationship between users, roles, privileges, objects, and so it's a complex web of relationships. And in many cases, what we help identify is who your privileged users are and who have access similar to them, an admin likeness score. And in some cases, we found administrators in the production system have left the organization a year ago and they still have full access. Or even more concerning, I've worked with other organizations where we identified a partner's access, and really the organization had no idea that this access was 90% like a DBA. They didn't have sysadmin role or DBA role, but they had a collection of privileges that made them 90% like a DBA. And so this is hard to see conventionally in the database, and you really need a solution to help you identify where there are overprivileging issues. In these cases, that partner needed access, but they had no idea that they had that level of access. So absolutely tackling overprivileging issues, the implementation of a least privilege environment, or supporting zero trust initiatives are certainly at the heart of our technology. Thank you, Julie.
No problem. It looks like we've got two more. Please continue to submit your questions. We'll get to as many as possible. The next question is, can your solution identify where the sensitive data, where we have sensitive data?
I'll
Oh,
grab that one,
absolutely.
Raul,
Yeah.
and then you can put some color on the end there. Simple answer is yes. A very good place to start is performing data discovery on the environment. Trustwave's tool is capable of doing that to give you an idea of where to start, give you a full inventory. And as I said at the start, pretty much everyone, 9 out of 10, are going to find things containing sensitive information that they did not know existed. So yeah, and then there's an easy way to do that with our technology. Is there anything else you'd add, Raul?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And what I would add is we're a global organization. And in many cases, I get asked things like, well, yes, we have credit card, but sensitive data could mean different things. In the U.S., we have Social Security number. In Pacific or Australia, they have a tax information number, and so there are different things, data that organizations consider sensitive. And so these are things that we can account for in the technology in identifying things that are sensitive to the organization. So identifying where we have this sensitive data and making sure we have controls to lock down that sensitive data is certainly job number one. Julie, any other questions?
Yep, got two more. Another one just came in. How do you provide the necessary training to the end users?
Great question. I'll take this one, Parker, seeing as I build a lot of those training programs.
See, yeah, you used to. Yeah, it's your program,
So,
man. You can talk about it.
We do have certification programs, and we look at it in many different ways. We provide certification programs from an administrative perspective of the technology. We also have our App Detective Pro tool, and many external auditors use and certify as a certified App Detective Pro auditor. DB Protect again has an administrator. We have training programs for our own internal SEs, and we have training programs for our partners who help us sell the technology, in different areas of the world. So we typically, when we have a contract, we discuss these things with our clients and typically add professional services to not only train, but to help get the product installed, get the technology installed, and get the organization heading down the right path. So these are definitely things that we have as part of our offering. That answers your question. Next
Okay,
question.
two more just came in. We already have a vulnerability scanner for operating systems applications and are considering database scanning as well. Is there much of a difference?
Well, and that's a great question. And so that part of what we went through today is really that difference. The technology should be purpose-built for the database, and it should have a rich data set in trying to identify where the actual risk exists. We've been around for a very long time, and we've approached many organizations who in some cases have these traditional VA solutions, and in some cases the organizations were still breached, and so they came to Trustwave knowing our tools in the industry, maybe having used App Detective Pro at one point in their career, knowing that we're purpose built for the database. And we've had organizations bring us in to help change their current program of, well, we thought it was good enough, but we really want to make sure we're checking all the boxes and identifying all the avenues of exploit. Is your security program identifying sensitive data? Is your security program providing in-depth identification of things like easily guessed passwords, default accounts? Can you identify, systems like somebody trying to brute force a password and see that they're running Nmap against your SQL Server instance. These are all things that a purpose-built solution will help organizations tackle. But your standard or traditional VA solutions are just okay, but they're not going to do the job. You really need a deep clinical assessment to find these serious security gaps or vulnerabilities. These are the things that will safeguard your data where it lives.
I think a really easy way to see that in practice is engage, with a vendor like us or a similar vendor that has hopefully you pick us, a purpose-built tool, and do a proof of concept. Run a scan on a couple of targets and see what each scan results look like. You can very easily see, what's providing a 2-foot deep look and what is going, down past the bedrock and into really what could be happening on the database level. And that's something that's very nice, with managed security services and such. You don't always get to try before you buy, but with technology, with software, I'm a salesperson, so it sometimes infuriates me because it extends the buying cycle, but I'm kidding. But it's really easy to do with technologies. You should run some comparisons and see what you find. And any organization that's not interested in providing that information in advance probably doesn't have good results to show. We're very happy to provide guided evaluations of our technology. We know it'll deliver well, and that can be a really good way to figure out, okay, maybe we have to use something general for certain areas, but for our most important assets, let's do something purpose-built. And you can see, because these reports do this and that report does this. So
right. Looks like we've got one more question.
I can take Richard and Matt's question. Do you want to read them off, Julie, in any order?
Yeah. Do you do any purple team exercises with the security teams after a penetration test has been performed by yourselves?
Yeah, so we do. We do offer penetration testing on the database level. We also, as part of our core services at Trustwave, offer application and network penetration testing, external, and we do provide the option to do any colored team of the rainbow. We do red, purple, and we can also do blue team training as well. So that is very common service for us to engage. It typically makes sense to speak with your Trustwave rep on the front end about combining that versus doing it a la carte afterwards, as we're usually able to package or bundle that into a whole engagement, as opposed to charging sort of full a la carte price for a pen test or a purple team engagement. Let us know what the outcomes, what roles you want to challenge and educate and elevate on your side, and yes, we can build a purple team exercise around that.
Parker, I'd like to add just a little bit to that.
Go right ahead.
Our last webinar, we actually had one of our pen testers in that session, and we talked about a penetration test that they performed where their entry point was the database. And this is not uncommon in that type of procedure, right? That the database is where we entered. And so the pen testers at Trustwave have always had the ability to do penetration testing with databases in some of their engagements. They can use our App Detective Pro tool instead of doing some of these things manually or through scripts. And so it's a great benefit for even our team to be able to use tools like App Detective Pro to identify weaknesses. Now, if you're asking, Richard, do we do any assessment or penetration testing of the databases after or during a purple team? Yeah, those things, as Parker mentioned, those things can be added, and absolutely there are ways to assess the database. We have things like a database risk assessment that could help focus in on a certain subset of targets and provide analysis on what has been found. So there's many ways to approach this, and certainly if it's penetration testing or something that involves databases or all of the above, Trustwave can assist. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Next
All right.
question, Julie.
Maybe this is the last one. People, please keep submitting your questions, and we definitely have time to get to them. All right. Is it possible to purchase a one-off scan across the database estate to determine the size of the problem?
Yes. Short and simple, yes. Our technologies, or we can also do a managed or guided scan using one of our threat researchers or pen testers to do it as well. But yes, it can. And Raul can probably speak to more specificity about which of our tools can do that. But yes, that is a very common practice, especially to build support or build budget or build clout. But the answer is yes. And Raul, you can please add any color you'd like to.
Absolutely. In some cases, when we're talking to organizations and we hear a question like this, it's very possible that the team understands that we need controls here, and we may have limited controls in this environment across our database ecosystem, and so the challenge then becomes, how do we help convince management that this is the right time, that this is an area that we really need to concentrate on, because this is what criminals are after, our data. And so that's called a database risk assessment. I mentioned it shortly a few minutes ago. A database risk assessment allows us to, let's say, come in and scan your 5 production systems and identify what shape they're in. And if we've not been doing anything, then this will help you better understand the size of the problem. And historically, when we did these things, we'd find servers with a highly privileged account, login same as password. It's an application that the developers have left. Everyone is terrified to even touch that system. And yep, we're aware that that exists. And so we'll find things like that, find databases that hadn't been patched in too long of a time. And so it'll help you identify vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and really help you see what level is the issue that you're dealing with. And that can help convince management to pull the trigger and get us the technology to help us safeguard these systems. It was a great question.
All right, we are at the end of the session. If you have any additional questions, feel free to submit them, and we'll be sure to have one of our security experts follow up with you. And as a reminder, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar recording via email by the end of the week. And if you're interested in learning more about today's topic, you can submit a request by clicking on the mail icon at the bottom of your screen. And before you leave, we would greatly appreciate it if you would take a moment to fill out the post-show survey to rate this session. You can view that below as well, or you will be prompted to take the survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you for joining our session, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Raul and Parker.
You're very welcome.